So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. I know the Munich Security Conference this year is overshadowed by the Russia crisis, but the Munich Security Conference was always something where you have all aspects of security in a more comprehensive way as a topic. Also, you have on the agenda, all the different players that are important with regard to achieving many objectives. And so we are very happy to have the mayors of three very important cities in the world, in Europe and outside the European Union here with us. And we have Ms. Clüver Ashbrook here as a specialist on this city. So we want to talk today on the role of cities, to reach the objectives that we have set in the Sustainable Development Goals, the roles of the cities that you all have played in combating COVID, the role of cities for climate change, the role of cities also to preserve democracy, because after all, you are the mayors of cities, the city administrations are those part of governance in a country that has a direct contact with citizens. You are those who are basically also responsible for democracy, and that democracy is alive. And we have learned also in preparation on this how this cooperation with cities has already been advanced. We have for many years these twinnings of cities and partnerships, but it has gone beyond. We know that there are groups of cities, there are the Visegrad capitals that work together, and there are larger groups going beyond continents that work together. And this is not only folklore, this is real work on trying to reach these objectives. And we are very happy to have this town hall meeting here today. It is a new format of the Munich, relatively new format of the Munich Security Conference. It's direct conversation, and what is also special, we have lots of people listening to us, watching us from outside. And after the introductory remarks, I'd like also to invite all of those listening and seeing us from the outside to ask questions. You can do that electronically, and I'll have a possibility then to pass on your questions to the mayors and to Ms. Clüver Ashbrook. So we have with us today, and I do this in a alphabetic way, the mayor of Budapest. We have Mayor Karácsony here, and it's wonderful that you are here. You are speaking, you are understanding English. You are not. You will speak some Hungarian, but we have David Korani, old friend, as here, and as an interpreter. We have then from Istanbul, Mayor İmamoğlu. Thank you very much for coming and being here today. And we have also then the mayor of Warsaw, Mr. Trzaskowski. So thank you very much for coming. We also go back in different positions in our earlier lives. So wonderful to have you here under these difficult circumstances, COVID, the weather, but we all made it. I have to excuse the mayor of Berlin, Madame Giffey, who wanted to come, but she was a victim of many people, and she caught COVID the last day. And but we are very happy to have Mrs. Clüver Ashbrook, who will now introduce the subject. She has written a lot about the role of cities, the importance of cities, and if you could give a brief introduction to this, you have the floor.
I shall. Thank you very much, Ambassador Heusgen. First of all, it's really a pleasure to be with all three of you, because I have thought long and hard about the impact that you are now having on global affairs. Because I think, as you noted, we now have over 200 networks of urban centers that have put themselves together on the basis of their own urban interests. And that is indeed an evolution from the 70s when we had the paternalistic structures that were developed within the United Nations. You think of the Habitat Program, or you think even of the EU Committee of the Regions or other regional bodies that came out of the power of nation states. And what you're witnessing now, because cities are really on the front lines, as you mentioned, Ambassador Heusgen, of all the transnational problems we can think of: pandemics, climate change, the integration of migrants, the need to create diverse and resilient cities. And they're doing it because they're on the front lines, and they're doing it because, and they have to do it because density multiplies every single transnational problem you can think of. And so for the first time, and this is then really a new phenomenon over the last roughly 10 years, that cities have identified their own urban interests independent of their nation states. And they do that on the basis of 4 sources of power, effectively, which is demographic power. By 2050, we'll have up to 70% of the world's population living in urban centers. They do it based on economic power. If you think of only the urban output of a city like New York or Los Angeles, ranks among the top 20 economies in the world if you did it by output, and you forgot about the barriers of nation states and cities. They do it on the basis of democracy and trust in a time when trust is atrophying in the democratic architecture, where Americans only have 17% confidence in their own Congress. 86% of Americans think that cities are the incubators and loci of change, and that is where they can feel change happen. And to give a couple of examples, when President Trump decided that he was going to leave the Paris Climate Accord, American cities banded together with industry leaders, with business, to form America's Pledge, 196 separate actors, to continue the commitments that the United States made to achieving the climate change goals. You have hundreds of cities bound together as part of the C40, where cities are doing what diplomats arguably should do always, which is to create aggregate data and information that gives them power, because they can suddenly prove that what they can achieve together is actually worth more than the sum of their parts. And they can prove that back to nation states. And if we think about what creates trust in this day and age, it's the fact that you can prove results. So cities have embraced data and digital diplomacy in the way that some of our ministries of foreign affairs are still struggling to implement those tools in giving a floor to data analytics and the usage of that kind of power. And so cities are really, not only are they the seismographs of the trends that are coming up that can disturb and perturb the way that we all interoperate, but they're really the incubators of solutions. And so my ardent wish in all of my writing and thinking about the work that you 3 are doing and other mayors around the globe is that that is fully and amply recognized. And because you mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals, the fact that you, again, had a city that began what we now refer to as voluntary local review in the city of New York and Penny Upper-Wadena, to say all of these goals can only be achieved and can only be fully realized if the urban component is the anchor of this work, not just goal 11. That is when we will fully be able to really push on the sustainability piece and do it measurably. Do it through open source data, do it in a way that we exchange information among one another, and anchor progress in a way that's measurable, and then collectively can assert power on the nation state level. So you see that both in multilateralism and in multilateral approaches, but you see this, of course, with the Visegrad 4 and the Free Cities Alliance in the power that they exerted on their national government, but first and foremost, how they were delivering for their citizens in the time of ardent need, which is during the pandemic. So my argument has always been that we are seeing a new development, both in terms of contending with national power and city power, that cities, because of what you can achieve, are really becoming an actor or a set of actors to be reckoned with, and they're doing it on the basis of new elements of power. And that's why they're worth paying attention to, and that's why their examples and the work that they do together are worth paying attention and bringing into the work of diplomacy. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much. So you are there, I understand you are responsible for implementing the SDGs and others. Of course, you do it, and you are 3 mayors of cities where you do it, where, let's say it this way, the central government is not necessarily your best friend and supporter in what you are trying to achieve. So relating to what you said there, the role of the cities, how do you see it from your individual city? And let me start with the mayor of Budapest. So Karácsony.
Nagyon szépen köszönöm a lehetőséget, hogy itt lehetek, és képviseltem a hazámat és Budapestet ezen a fontos konferencián.
Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to represent my home city, Budapest, and my home country, Hungary.
Egy kicsit ahhoz, hogy éreztetni tudjam, hogy Budapest és a központi kormányzat viszonya milyen, ahhoz egy picit beszélnem kell arról, hogy Magyarország egy olyan relatíve kicsi ország, amelynek Budapest egy relatíve nagyvárosa, és nagyjából 100 éve magyar történelemben van egy éles konfliktus Budapest és az ország egésze között.
In order to fully grasp the peculiarities of the Hungarian situation, you should understand that Budapest is an oversized city of about 2 million people in a country of about 10 million, and this is an urban-rural divide that goes back a century at least.
Az első világháború után egy autoriter rezsim működött Magyarországnak, a vezetője bűnös városként nevezte a fővárost, és ez a hozzáállás mélyen áthitatja a magyar jobboldal narratíváját.
So after the First World War, the then authoritarian leader called Budapest the Sin City, and this is still in many ways part of the rhetoric of the conservative right.
Erre a történelmi tradícióra épül rá az a mostani helyzet, amiben vagyunk, hogy egy hibrid rezsim alakult ki Magyarországon az elmúlt 12 évben, és ebben a 12 évben az egyedüli érdemi politikai változás az volt, hogy 2 évvel ezelőtt az ellenzéki pártok megnyerték az önkormányzati választást Budapesten és a nagyvárosokban.
And this is prevalent in the current political context as well, because in the last 12 years, the real change, the only major change happened 2 years ago when opposition mayors like the mayor of Budapest won the elections against the incumbent hybrid regime of Fidesz.
És erre a 2 rétegre egy harmadik rétegként került rá a Covid-járvány, ami óriási kihívást jelentett a kormánynak is, a városnak is, és tovább éleszte ezeket a feszültségeket.
And on top of those 2 layers, there came COVID as the third layer, and exacerbated the existing historical and actual political tensions.
A magyar kormány az elmúlt 12 évben nagyon sok ellensúlyt leépített, az önkormányzati szektor súlyát leginkább azzal lehet kifejezni, hogy 2010-ben a GDP 10%-a volt az önkormányzati szektorban, most ez 5%, és az önkormányzatok rengeteg jogosultságukat elvesztették.
So in the last 12 years, the government have dismantled many circles of freedom in Hungary, among them the municipalities or the municipal system. 12 years ago, about 10% of the GDP were redistributed on the municipal level. Now it's less than 2%.
A magyar GDP-nek 38%-át budapesti vállalkozások hozzák létre, Budapesten termelődik meg, az itt megtermelt adóknak azonban csak a 2%-a marad a város költségvetésében.
About 38% of the Hungarian GDP is produced in or around Budapest, yet it's around 2% that tax income that Budapest can spend.
És az elmúlt 2 évben a város bevételeinek a közel 35%-a elveszett, ezeknek egy részben a Covid-járvány miatt volt, a másik kormányzati megszorítások miatt.
And due partially to COVID and also partially because of government measures, about 35% of the city's income were lost in the last 2 years.
Ezért bő 40 nap múlva Magyarországon zajló parlamenti választások egyik tétje az, hogy lesznek-e még Magyarországon önkormányzatok.
So one of the stakes of the national election that will take place in about 43 days is whether there will be a municipal system at all in Hungary going forward.
És hogyha nincsenek barátaid idehaza, akkor keresd barátokat a világon máshol, és mi azért kezdtünk el egy intenzív városdiplomáciai kapcsolatrendszert kiépíteni, hogy a kormánnyal való rossz viszonyunkat, amely egyébként nem a mi szándékunk szerint alakult, valamilyen szinten kompenzálni tudjuk európai, illetve városi szövetségekkel.
So if you don't have friends at home, you naturally look outside. And when we were establishing these alliances, we were creating an international solidarity network, and we wanted to get support from our friends.
Csak egy apró példát szeretnék mondani, ami nagyon jellemző. A pandémia legelején, amikor nem lehetett maszkokat beszerezni, vagy nagyon problémás volt ez, a fővárosi önkormányzat a magyar kormánytól nem kapott maszkokat, Taipei-től kaptunk maszkokat.
So just to give you an example in terms of how bad the relationship is between the capital city and the government, at the the outset of the pandemic, we, of course, like everybody else, had trouble getting masks, and of course the central government did not end up helping us. Taipei did.
Kicsit messziről jöttek azok a maszkok, de örültünk nekik, hogy megérkeztek.
They came from such a distance, but finally they arrived.
És elkezdtünk egy közös lobbit annak érdekében, hogy az Európai Uniós finanszírozási mechanizmusokat gondolják át, és a városok közvetlen finanszírozását bővítsék. Ez Magyarország esetében és Lengyelország esetében különösen fontos, hiszen itt a jogállami problémák miatt ezek az országok nem fognak hozzájutni Európai Uniós támogatásokhoz.
And that's why we also embarked upon a concerted lobbying effort together with Warsaw, together with other cities across Europe, to change the system how European funds are distributed and to create a more direct connection between Brussels and the cities. And this is particularly prevalent in a Hungarian and in a Polish context, of course.
Fontos lenne, hogyha az országot büntetik a kormány rossz politikái miatt, akkor ez a büntetés ne az országot büntesse, hanem a kormányt, és hogy legyen mód arra, hogy ezek a támogatások legalább részben a városokhoz, vállalkozásokhoz, civil szervezetekhez közvetlenül el tudjanak érni.
It's critically important that if a national government is being punished by the EU, rightly so, because of their misdeeds on the rule of law and democracy, then that should not mean that their country or the citizens of their country also end up suffering. So at least partially, in some shape or form, cities, corporations, SMEs will have to be compensated.
Thank you very much. I like the description of your capital as the Sin City. Mayor İmamoğlu, does President Erdogan also think about your city as a Sin City, or what is the reputation of Istanbul?
Thank you very much. I'm very happy being here with my friends and colleagues, and they visited me in Istanbul. I have to go Warsaw and Budapest as soon as possible, and we are very close friends, and also we have the same destiny maybe. But in Turkey, a little bit it's different because Mr. Erdogan says Istanbul is my love, but I haven't understood what kind of love is it. Actually, this meaningful meeting in Munich, as you said, shaped on the unfortunately there is some conflict between Ukraine and Russia. But life is going on, and we have to feel each other, and we have to work the common values in our cities and in our countries. And I would also like to bring the greetings of people of Istanbul. When I say people of Istanbul, I want to explain it because a lot of greetings. Why? According to official figures, the population is 16 million. But there is also a refugee community, 1.5, between 1.5 and 2 million refugees. And on an average, in a day, we have 2 million tourists and foreigners. So with the population almost 20 million, people, I got their best feelings to you. This population means that Istanbul is bigger than 19 countries in Europe. I have to say that also Europe begins from Istanbul, from the West. As you all know, the world is going through an important change with positive and negative outcomes for all of us. But nowhere is this change more obvious than in our cities. Cities are places where democracy is bred. Our cities will therefore define our future and the future of democracy. I have some questions. Will the cities simply be run by those that hold power and the elected elites? Or will they be run on the basis of common good and shared wisdom with the participation of citizens and civil society? How we answer this question will be important for the future of humanity. The story of Istanbul is critical in this framework because it's a very diverse and dynamic city, and it has demanded freedom at every stage of its history. We are aware that Istanbul's mission goes beyond than the ancient city walls, even beyond Turkey's borders. I felt this after my election. In our model of local administration, solidarity and democracy go hand in hand. I'm not here today just representing 16 million Istanbul residents who expressed in 2019 their desire for democracy, but to also convey their message of solidarity with others who have similar struggles. The local elections in 2019 were unfairly cancelled, and later the rerun elections led to a decisive victory for us. That was the beginning, most important beginning for democracy for Turkey. 2019 local elections in Istanbul became a symbol of the Turkish people's desire for a democracy. We carry this valuable mission with pride and try to enhance it every day. This is our most important responsibility. We know the world is watching us. We have been creating new instruments and tools to broaden democratic participation in local governance. Our goal is to create a city where people can achieve happiness, are treated fairly, and test freedoms. In this sense, I determined to be most democratic mayor of Istanbul. And everywhere I started to say, I have to be maybe the most democratic mayor of Europe also. Why I'm here and I'm talking with you with my free willings and free opinions and share with my friends and colleagues with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First let me say also on this occasion, you said that you are hosting 1.5 until almost 3 million refugees, and I think we all agree around the town hall here how much we appreciate that and recognize the extra burden that Istanbul is carrying with the refugees, mostly from the horrible war in Syria. So really appreciate that under very difficult circumstances. Thank you for this. Mayor Trzaskowski, is your city a sin city or a love city?
It is both. That's the beauty of it. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's great to be here among friends, and we go all the way back, you know, doing good things for Europe, and it's fantastic to be among friends from Budapest and Istanbul. Well, first of all, a bit of a context. So part of our success in Eastern Europe, in Poland and in Hungary, and this incredible trajectory that we've made was possible because of strong local and regional government. I would submit to you that the whole idea to devolve power at the beginning of our transition is responsible partly for our success. And it hasn't been done in some of the post-Soviet states, and they're doing it now, and that explains some of the differences, because where decisions are taken close to the people, that does the trick. The tensions that we observe in our countries are not just normal tensions, because you see tensions between local government, between the mayor and, you know, the federal government or the central government almost everywhere. You see them in Britain, you see them in Spain, you see them sometimes in Italy, and so on and so forth. But it's an all-out war in case of Poland, in case of Hungary, and in case of Turkey. And I could probably give a few other examples. Because we are enemy number one of the national government. And they want to centralize power. They want to change the parameters of the game. And they're doing it wisely, because they're taking away our prerogatives, they're taking away our money by changing the tax code. They're doing everything to make it difficult for us to use European money, because they play with the criteria, and they make it difficult for us to actually realize the priorities that are set before us. And now the most important argument is this: if we want to realize our priorities together, be it the UN priorities or the European Union priorities, you cannot do it without the cities. I mean, you cannot fight climate change if you do not involve the cities, right? You can retrofit as many buildings as you want in the east of Poland, which is great, let's do it. But if you really want to realize the priorities together, you need to involve the cities. And whatever priorities you want, if we talk about digitization, if we talk about inclusion, if we talk about climate change, if you talk about innovation, you won't do it without the cities. And when we talk about, you know, realizing panels like these, when we talk about, you know, influencing European politicians so that they change the way in which they think, this is not because of me, this is not because of Gergely, this is not because of Mayor İmamoğlu, it's because we need to get our act together and actually realize the priorities that are set before us, because we are at the forefront of change. And we are basically tackling some of those issues first. Take the pandemic as an example. And of course, the way in which we cooperate is unprecedented, because we want to do what we set ourselves to do. And, you know, it is a different kind of situation. I was a minister, I was a member of the European Parliament, and so on and so forth. I was a member of the National Parliament. The mayor is walking the streets of the city. You know, we are asked every day about how we are realizing our priorities. So it's a must for us to do that. And the way in which we collaborate, both internally in Poland and with other local and regional governments, and of course, through all of those networks that we are setting up. I'm in the Committee of the Regions, Eurocities. We've set up our own network, and I'm going to tell you two sentences about it, is because we want to learn from one another, because we want to exchange experience, and we want to also exert certain pressure on the decision makers. And finally, about the Pact of the Free Cities, we've decided that values are incredibly important. That if we want to talk about transparency, if we want to be serious about progressive values, about taking care of minorities, about creating cities which are open, tolerant, and so on and so forth, we need to do it together. And that's why we decided to set up this network. That's why we invited Kiev 3 days ago to join us, in order to send a powerful message that that's what we are doing. And the problem, and this is the last message I want to tell you, with the decision makers sometimes, is that we all need to think out of the box. Wherever I go, you know, all my friends are telling me, you know, how can we help? Oh, Rafal, you know, your government is so difficult. How can we help? And then when I tell them, listen, just, you know, change a few procedures. You know, direct financing for the cities, 5%. And it's a win-win situation. You know, somehow populists do not win cities. You want to fight for democracy? Help us out. You want to realize European priorities? Help us out. And on top of that, climate neutrality, all of those goals, 55%, no one understands that. Do one simple thing. Take away all the diesel-powered buses from the streets of the European cities in 5 years. Just like that. Direct financing. The Commission opens up a project, 200 cities enter it, fulfill, obviously promise certain pledges, and you do it in 5 years. Retrofit 20 most difficult historical buildings in each of our cities. Munich, Warsaw, Berlin, Budapest, and so on. People will see it. It's a win-win situation. And everyone says, procedures, the Commission, we're all for you, but, so, and let's not rattle the feathers of the national government. We need to collaborate with them and so on and so forth. If we really want to get our act together, of course, we should be organizing panels like these, but we should be thinking out of the block. And out of the box, sorry. And only through that we can actually make for change. And not for us, not for Gergely or me, not only for the citizens of our cities, but for Europe and for the world. Because only then we can really start realizing priorities. Because you know what? I was a minister, I was a member of parliament. It takes years before actually what you set out to do produces an effect. When you're a mayor, it happens like that. And on top of that, you're accountable to the people. Every day you walk the streets of your city. Mm-hmm. So let's work together on actually implementing some of these changes.
Thank you very much for this plea, and I like the way that you made it very practical. We all know when you talk about buses, and very practical. Now, there is room, but I don't have a seat there for the two of you, members of the European Union, for a representative of the European Commission. If we do it next year, promise we get somebody from Brussels. So since also I think the President of the European Commission has left Munich, we can't ask her. So I'm afraid, Ms. Clüver, Ashbrook, you have to step in. Just imagine yourself as a commissioner or a director general in one of the DGs in Brussels. What would be your response to the two mayors? Because I understand that you would echo what your friend Trzaskowski has just said, right?
Well, I think the basic thing is we need to understand what world we live in. And if strategic competition and if Europe's role between the two other poles is something that we're serious about, and if we're serious about proving the value and functionality of our democracy, and we're serious about proving how innovation works and how innovation can be scaled and how innovation can be scaled through new networks, then cities are clearly your answer. Because if you need to concretely, and I love your analogy effectively, and I used to work for Mayor Bloomberg, and his piece was, potholes and pandemics effectively. Mayor has to deal with everything. And if you need those kind of data points and proof points that investing in resilient democratic systems, and you all addressed some form of rethinking representation in the city, and you effectively spoke to new levers. So many cities are embracing this idea of participatory budgeting, so that every citizen knows how every cent within the city gets spent if it comes in. So the fact that doing as you're describing would create metrics, measurability, accountability, and if we're looking for proof within our democratic systems that they really do work, if that's what we need to first and foremost prove back to our citizens as we address the strategic competition that we're faced with China, with Russia, and other autocratic systems, wouldn't that be the most clear-cut way to do that? And yes, would that challenge implicitly potentially how national power gets aggregated and redistributed? Because, and this is true, what you're describing, the squeeze that the nation state put on you effectively is part of the reason that Boris Johnson, when he was mayor of London, was a great advocate of getting all of the illegal immigrants in London recognized, not because maybe he was such a fan of illegal migration, quote unquote, but because he needed the head count to get the money back from Westminster, right? To really, to prove his point about devolution. But there's an inbound benefit to making that happen when we're trying to make our larger case globally within this international competition that we're faced. So if I were to be either advising the EU Commission or in that position myself, I would say it makes perfect sense, because what I need more than anything is a clear proof of concept. And nobody can deliver proof of concept the way that cities can. And particularly cities, if we think about it, that within 8 years, you're going to have 43 cities that are over 10 million strong. That's where you find proof of concept.
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, the one thing we can do afterwards here is, I can, if you are happy with this, I can do this in the name of all of you. And I mean, there's also support for, of course, Turkey, you know, write a letter to the President of the Commission and transmit the question to them, why is it not possible that 5% of the budget that goes to the individual countries cannot go to mayors? Now, let me go to the questions that I have from people around, and there are lots of them. So I would ask you to be short. Maybe Mayor İmamoğlu, what is the role of cities when it comes to fighting the climate crisis?
Yeah, we have, as Rafal says, you can't solve the problem about climate change without cities. As I said, our population is 20 billion. So the climate change crisis starts in the cities. So we try to work about this. You mentioned that C40 workings, we are together in that meetings. The first case is climate change. We explained green solution, the name is Green Solution Program for Istanbul, which contains the aim of 2030 and 2050. And of course, we need some financing models to solve some problems and to see our future aims about climate change. And also, we had a Istanbul Planning Agency, and which is the most popular agency in Istanbul now, and we are working in that agency with academicians, universities, and some institutions around the world, and we are working our some projects in our city. For example, about transportation, we have 10 metro lines on construction now. 10 metro lines on construction now, and we are preparing 2 more metro lines start to construct for next year. All of them is about 150 kilometers metro lines. And also another projects I can say, they are the same with other cities, but the main problem is, unfortunately, we can't work together with central government. We try to make some magical link between central government. We don't listen sometimes their voices, bad voices, but we try to make a link with them. But the main problem is also what Rafal said. Unfortunately, we couldn't have direct financing model with some financing companies, or for example EBRD or different institutions, how we can work directly with our projects. They are feasible projects. We don't need any finance outside. We can solve all problems, but we want to make relation on a table directly to the financial institutions from Europe, all around the world. And also this helps us for democracy also, because if we are successful, democracy will win, because we had a victory against the central government, which is the voice of cities, residents, people. So if the world looks us like this, this will help climate change, digitalizations, or the other problems. We solve all of them, but the most important thing is feel us, work together, and solve the problems together with the world or with the Europe.
Can I add half a point to that? Because back to the EU level, what that indicates and underlines is how you're going to spend that global gateway money. Yeah. How are you going to spend it? And listening to this, in the same way that China realizes fully strategically how useful cities are as nodes and duplicators, and so what China is doing when it picks out its critical infrastructure project, where's it going? It's going primarily to cities. It targets the places where the node structures are, and they're in big cities. They're the harbor of Piraeus. They're the city of Duisburg that they transform through their investments. That is strategic thinking on China's part because of how powerful cities can be. So in reverse, when you think about now we have the money on the table for Global Gateway, based on this, where do you think it should go?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll, as I say, next time we have a representative of the Commission, but in the meantime, we'll ask that question also with relation to Global Gateway, because this is... Now, I have a question for the two of you. First, Anonymous, as a previous Erasmus exchange student, I want to learn Mr. Trzaskowski's opinions about fight against racism and xenophobia. It was a big problem, and from our Minister for Culture, Claudia Roth, who I saw earlier here.
Behind you.
Oh, you're behind you. Sorry, I don't have eyes in the back. They ended, so thank you for doing it that way. No, thank you for being here. In the time of the pandemic repression, increased of 30%. What can you do for the cultural infrastructure, artist, intellectual? What's the role of culture? So maybe we start with Mayor Trzaskowski on the question of fight against racism and xenophobia, and then we go to you on the other question.
Yeah, I'm just going to try to be telegraphic because there are three issues. First of all, when it comes to supporting culture, we all remember Churchill, you know, when they wanted to cut financing for culture, and he said, so what are we fighting for? So obviously, what we are trying to do in a city, we are supporting all the creative sectors, and we've done quite a lot in order to allow them to live through the pandemic. For example, to change the way we finance them and to allow for financing of some projects online and so on and so forth. It was one of the most important things that we've done in Warsaw throughout the pandemic. When it comes to fighting xenophobia, I mean, you know, I've been portrayed by the crazy propaganda that is targeting me, as the crazy propaganda is targeting all of us, as this crazy leftist. Why? Because, you know, I signed the LGBT charter because I talk about minorities and so on and so forth. And I always tell them, listen, I mean, you know, this is my job. You know, a job of a mayor of a city is to help all the people who have problems. You know, I mean, if big white boys will be attacked on the cities of Warsaw, I will be defending them. But it so happens that in the current political climate, it's the minorities who are targeted, you know, because of the hate campaigns which are directed at them by the government. So it is the refugees, it is the people of different cultures, it is the LGBT community, and so on and so forth. And of course, this climate produces quite a lot of incidents. So that's why we are taking it upon ourselves in order to help. If the government is cutting financing for in vitro programs, for fighting violence at home, for helping the disabled people, for the LGBT community. We are doing it because we are there to actually fill the vacuum when it's needed. And we are collaborating with the NGOs in order to deliver on those programs. But I wanted to relate to climate change as the last of my comments, because why is it so important? Not only because, of course, we need to save the planet, but because all of those issues and all of those challenges are interrelated. If you want to care about the quality of air, if you want to fight climate change, if you want to improve the chances in education, if you want to do something about equity, you need to address this problem. And I'm just going to give you one example. I talked about it earlier today during one of the panels. We have 18 districts in Warsaw. One of them is the most difficult one because it was industrial. A lot of people who are underprivileged live there, the so-called difficult families and so on and so forth. The expectancy of life in Praga district in Warsaw for a male is 69 years. The expectancy of life in the district that I live in is 83. It is a difference like between Bangladesh and Tokyo. And we had educational problems because the level of education were very low. And we thought it's because of the difficulties inherent in this district. When we started fighting climate change, we started exchanging the coal-powered stoves with city money and putting central heating there. And it turned out that in 3 years, the levels of education started rising up because those kids were simply cold. They were catching cold and they were missing school. And it turned out that by doing that, you can actually also address other problems. If you want to tackle innovation, that's what I explain to all of those people from the right in Poland when they say, there's no climate, men has no influence over climate change. And I tell them, okay, we are not going to have this conversation because we will never agree. But at least consider this. Europe will do it anyhow. So either you will adapt or you will be left out at the margins of the European economy, right? So if you want to do innovation, if you want to fight for equity, if you want to have clean air, you need to tackle the problem of global warming. And that's why we're doing it. And that's why it is top priority for all the people that I talk to, seen from different angles.
Thank you. How is it back home on the two questions?
Amikor én megnyertem a választást, akkor a programnak az volt a címe, hogy Budapest mindenkié, és hogy ezt komolyan veszem, és ez kötelez, amikor különböző gyűlöletkeltő kampányokkal kell szembe helyezkedni.
So when I won the mayoral election, my slogan was Budapest belongs to all of us. And hence, this is also an obligation on me to protect all those minorities.
Ja, a magyar kormány is Lengyelhez hasonlóan folyamatosan ellenségépeket gyárt és kipécéz társadalmi csoportokat, és velük szemben gyűlöletkampányokat épít föl, például hajléktalan emberek ellen, menekültek ellen, vagy az LMBTQ közösségek ellen.
The Hungarian government does the same as the Polish government. They need an enemy all the time, and they create these enemies. They did this with the homeless community in Budapest. They did this with the refugees, and of course they do this with the LGBTQ community as well.
Mivel mögöttem egy nagyon sokszínű politikai összefogás van, sokan féltettek attól, hogy én nagyon markánsan állásfoglaljak ezekben a kérdésekben, de én nem hallgattam rájuk.
I am backed by quite a colorful political coalition, and there were some voices within that coalition that would caution me against taking a very strong stance on the LGBTQ issue, but I was not listening to those voices.
Amikor még kerületi polgármester voltam, és a kerületek kijelölhettek olyan területeket a városban, ahol hajléktalan embereknek tilos tartózkodni, én voltam az egyedüli polgármester, aki tiltakozott ezen, és nem jelölt ki ilyen övezeteket.
When I was the district mayor still, and the government introduced the possibility for districts to delineate special zones that homeless people should not stay in, I was the only district mayor that refused to delineate those territories.
Barátaim azt mondták, hogy ezt ne csináljam, ebbe bele fogok bukni az emberekhez. Ugye ez egy népszerű dolog, én nem engedtem ebben.
My friends told me that since this is a popular measure, you should do it too, but I was reluctant.
Én voltam az első, aki szivárványos zászlót rakott ki a Pride idején Budapesten középületre. Azt mondták a barátaim, ne csináljam ezt, mert ez nem lesz népszerű.
I was the first mayor who put up the rainbow flag on the town hall as a mayor, and of course friends told me that you should not do this because it's not going to be popular.
Aztán megnyertem a főpolgármester választást, a legnagyobb sikert arattam az Orbán kormány idején politikusként. Ha az ember hisz valamiben, és kellően bátor, akkor maga mögé tud állítani a közvéleményt, és azt gondolom, hogy a Budapest egy toleráns város egy gyűlölködő országban.
And then I won the Lord Mayoral election after this, and it's still my firm conviction that if you follow your firm convictions, and if you showcase that you're firm enough in your convictions, then eventually you could also win over popular opinion on those issues.
Ami a kultúrát illeti, ez szoros összefüggésben van ezzel, mert a budapesti liberális kulturális elitet gyűlöli az Orbán kormány, és amikor főpolgármester lettem, az első változás az pont a színházak finanszírozásában volt. Az állam azt mondta, csak akkor ad pénzt a színházaknak, hogy ő mondja meg, hogy ki az igazgató.
And the cultural question is actually closely connected to this topic because the cultural elite in Budapest, which is perceived by the government as being very liberal, has been one of the first that got punished after the mayor got elected. And there was a sort of a conditionality introduced that in order for the theaters to get proper funding, they would need to put on directors and shows that the government prefers.
Nem kértünk pénzt, és mi nevezzük ki az igazgatókat pályázat alapján, illetve kötöttünk egy olyan megállapodást a kormánnyal, hogy a művészszínházakat a város finanszírozza, az operett színházakat, ahol meg nincs politika, azt meg az állam, és így meg tudtuk menekíteni ezeket a szigeteket a magyar kulturális életben.
So we actually decided not to take any money from the central government on theaters, so that we retained the right of appointing the theater directors. And then we made a deal with the central government whereby they took all the theaters that did like operettes and stuff that's not political, and then maintained all the real theaters.
A pandémia nagyon súlyosan érintette a Budapesten is a kulturális életet, de ezen túllépünk. A pandémiánál kicsit nagyobb problémánk van, azt úgy hívják, hogy Orbán Viktor.
And of course, the pandemic ended up impacting the cultural sector quite severely as everywhere else, but we have a much bigger problem on that front, which is Viktor Orbán.
És én is egy gondolatot szeretnék mondani a klímaváltozás kapcsán. Az nagyon fontos látni, hogy részben a kibocsátás nagyobb részben a városokból jön, de a klímaváltozás szembeni küzdelemnek a társadalmi támogatottsága a városokban a legerősebb, és ez egy nagyon fontos lehetőség, amit ki kell aknáznunk.
And just finally, one sentence on climate change. Of course, emissions, or the bulk of the emissions, come from cities, but also the societal support for robust climate action also comes from cities.
Az emberek részben jobban el vannak látva információkkal, részben nyitottak, részben pedig érzékelik a saját életükön, hogy milyen fontos a zöld átállás. Például érzik azt, amikor a gyerekeik asztmásak lesznek, érzik a zöld felületek hiányát.
People are much more informed on the issue of climate change. People are much more open-minded about climate change. But probably most importantly, people feel the impacts of climate change on a daily basis in terms of public health, in terms of their kids getting asthma, in terms of the lack of green surfaces, etc.
És a városnak van egy klímastratégiája, amelynek az elfogadása azért volt különlegesen fontos, mert egy állampolgári gyűlés keretében beszéltük meg, és lehetett látni, hogy az emberek valódi információkat kapnak, akkor nagyon nyitottak a nagy léptékű változásokra is, tehát el lehet fogadtatni akár olyan dolgokat is, amiket első ránézésre népszerűeknek gondolnánk.
And Budapest just last March adopted a very ambitious climate strategy, and we did it in a way that it went through multiple iterations of what we call citizens' assemblies, and those citizens' assemblies, by giving people proper information and by equipping them with proper information, helped us adopt a strategy that were a lot more ambitious than we initially foreseen, because there was popular support for those measures because people understood.
Elkezdtük ezt a programot végrehajtani, először meg akartunk állapodni a kormányának a finanszírozásáról. Azt mondták, hogy nem adnak pénzt. Aztán megállapodtunk az Európai Fejlesztési Bankkal, hogy ők hitelt adnak erre. A kormány nem adott lehetőséget, hogy fölvegyük ezeket, tehát megtagadták a hitelfelvétel lehetőségét is.
So we started negotiations with the central government to support the robust climate action agenda. Of course, they refused. Then we negotiated a complete package with the European Investment Bank that they were willing to lend the financing necessary to implement measures, but the government also refused to condone that, so that fell apart.
pedig ezek a projektek, ezek kisléptékű projektek, kevés pénzből nagy társadalmi hatékonyságot tudnak elérni, és nagy kibocsátás megtakarítást, apró beruházásokkal, amelyek nagyon hatékonyan használnak fel a forrásokat.
And the plan consists of small but very efficient and very targeted measures that would have been very, very efficient in addressing the core problems of climate.
És hogy mennyire próbálunk, mindig harcolunk a kormánnyal, és mindig kitalálunk valami újat. Most például a város elhatározta azt, hogy mivel nem tudunk villamosokat vásárolni, mert nem tudjuk finanszírozni, a főváros maga fog gyártani saját magának villamosokat.
And since we are always in this fight with the central government, and it's very hard to get around it, and since we were unsuccessful in convincing the government to help us get financing for a new tramway system, we actually ended up deciding that the city itself will produce the tramways together, will find a way around.
Mivel a Budapesten az átlagos, a villamosok átlag életkora az annyi, mint az enyém, 45 év, olyan mérnökeink vannak, akik ezeket életben tartják, ezeket a villamosokat, hogy akár újakat is tudnak építeni.
The average age of trams in Budapest is the same as the mayor's age, which is 45 years. And we have excellent engineers who keep those old machines alive, so we figured that they might actually be able to build new ones as well.
Yes. Just briefly, come back, so you tried actually to get funding from the European Investment Bank, but they said they have to go through the government. Yeah.
Igen, kormány jóváhagyás kell a hitelfelvételhez, és nem kaptunk jóváhagyást.
The package was finalized with the European Investment Bank, but in the Hungarian legal system you need the central government to condone, because it's a loan and municipalities are technically not allowed to be indebted. So because of that, the national government could veto essentially the package.
I mean, there are so many investment and finance bankers around the world. They usually find a way around this. No, there's no way. By the way, Rafal Trzaskowski, the president of the European Investment Bank, is a former colleague of yours, a European minister, Hoyer. You have to talk to him to see if he can.
No, we were. I mean, the thing is that's a good example. Like what the Polish government did on the recovery fund that it didn't get yet, because of the problems with the rule of law. But they simply said, yeah, fantastic, grants for us, loans for you, and you will repay them, not the government. So of course it means, and then they, play with the criteria to make our life very difficult. For example, everything's fantastic, but you cannot realize metro programs from the recovery fund as they planned it, So that's another thing when it comes to the European Commission and our friends in Europe. I mean, just look at the criteria and make sure that they're transparent, that they're non-political. I know that there are not that many strings attached, but that's what the European institutions should do. But again, let's not ruffle the feathers of the Polish government, because then the Spanish government will not be happy, and that's the story. We know it so well.
Yeah. I gradually understand when you said earlier it is an all-out war with your federal government. Okay, I have a question for you. Clüver, Ashbrook, please give an example of how data and analytics can empower cities and strengthen democracy.
Oh, well, yeah. So since we've mentioned C40 and since we've mentioned things like the metrics around climate change and then how you get that done, to have harbors and nodes like C40, for instance, where you can now have that data collected, reconfigured, analyzed across the board, and made useful is one way that it gives power, lobbying power, back to cities, because it gives you proof of concept such that you can either at the UN level or within the national context or within the supranational context on the EU level, again, show that those kind of like different investment systems, for instance, and that example made me think of Bogota and what the mayor of Bogota did and how they financed eventually their tram lines through public-private partnerships. I mean, all these sort of models that have now been exchanged and how they create functional solutions ultimately lead to delivering for citizens. And delivering for citizens and making that, as all three of these gentlemen have underlined, understandable to citizens, accountable to citizens, understanding how taxpayer, quote unquote, euros get spent, and making and or loans get spent even, that creates a direct understanding of how democracy and financial power and decision-making tie together. And I think in cities, when you can do that on an innovative way and you can share examples from across the globe on how to make that happen, that to me is the best way that you can spread the functionality of democracy and accountability, even in things like municipal finance.
Okay. Thank you. A question that I get, I interpret the question a bit from our Member of Parliament, Roderich Kiesewetter. We're talking a lot about China and China with dumping offers for digitalization, dumping offers for credit. Have you been approached as cities by China and saying, you have difficulties getting money, now here's some money free and you only have to pay it back in, 10, 15, 20 years? No. You don't, China doesn't go that, yes. How do you prepare your city for the world of the future? What are you doing about digitalization and combating digital threats? Who would like to?
Yeah.
Who has, yes.
We have one project which is also the project of digital democracy. I explained it. The name of the app is Istanbul is Yours. And we want to make a direct connection with our Istanbulites with this app. Last month we started that project, and now we had about 250,000 members. We want to have about at the end of this year, more than 1 million members with this app. And we will have direct connection with them. We can ask, they can answer us, or they can share what they feel. This is also not a national project, because we have a project partner from Germany also, and it will be a sample of digital connection with Istanbulites, and also it helps make the metropolitan municipality who lives there, their municipality, they share everything, they want everything, and make the people the part or most important part of decision. So this is our digital mark. I want to say the name of that app, Istanbul is Yours. Last November, I decided make a ecosystem network in Balkan cities, and I invited some major cities from Balkans, and they came to Istanbul on November. And the name of this meeting, the network is B40, like C40, and we shared this kind of digital projects, which helps the future of cities in that meeting. For example, this year we will have the next meeting in Athens with my friend Kostas Bakoyannis, the mayor of Athens. And now we have about 40 municipalities from Balkan cities, all of the countries from Balkans. Why I say this? Because We have good projects. We want to share these kind of projects each other, and it helps. It helps not only cities, not only in that country, and also it helps our continent and the world. So this project will our start, and I will share this also with the mayors, my friends, colleagues. As I said, my partner is also a German firm.
Can I add 2 sentences to that? Because this in principle was something that was incubated in the city of Baltimore in a very basic idea, which is called a 311 system. And it was originally a telephone number, one call to City Hall. And it's spread in different variants now across the world. But the idea is that then it generates data about, you were talking about how you really understand and you make citizens part of the decision making and an understanding of their own placemaking, and then how you can use that kind of data, because that will allow you to do predictable forecasting of what happens in specific neighborhoods when you have data. And this is where it, of course, becomes tricky. Who owns the data? How is the data? How can the data be solely owned by the urban environs, because of that data in cases of repressive regimes fell to national governments. So there you see some of the dynamics that are happening on an international scale, happening on an urban national scale as well. But in principle, those kind of tools allow City Hall to be much wider than the physical building itself. And the way that those examples spread and the data that then you aggregate from there can make it comparable, again, to then find systems that are either open data systems that cities can self-fund because they can exchange the how-to, or you find other private-public partnerships that allow you to do that. But I think it's a really formidable example because it started as a phone number, and it evolved into the digital and data revolution in the way that you're describing it. So again, cities at the forefront of making some really critical decisions on understanding where their citizens are.
Yeah. And the pandemic has accelerated that. I mean, because a lot of the services that the city provides are now available online. That's what we're doing. But of course, making data available, open data, that's what we are doing in Warsaw, where those apps are actually created by people or by companies, and they help run the city, or they help the citizens to use the city services in a much more effective way. And when it comes to the Chinese, just one sentence about that. Fortunately in Europe we have something which is called public procurement, which is open for the European Union companies, which is open to the companies from the states with which we have trade deals, like Koreans, who, for example, won a tender for trams in Warsaw for the Japanese and so on, but not for the Chinese. So fortunately, our European rules help us in that respect.
Thank you. I want to come to another subject, and this is gender. I know this podium here is not a good example, but to excuse myself, we had the mayor of Berlin, and we had the mayor or the deputy mayor of Los Angeles, Nina, who is very active, you know her, so it would look differently. So before I'm criticized, I go into the counter-offensive here. But I want to stick with this topic. We had this on other fora here, the role of women participation. You spoke a lot about LGBTI. Can you say something about how you in your cities promote women participation, women protection, implementation of, I'm a UN ambassador, a former resolution 1325.
Sure. I'll start because I started my campaign with women's rights, running for the mayor of Warsaw. I mean, one of the most important things that we did, like an interesting fact, right? Because, politicians will tell you that they know everything about, what their citizens want. What we did, we simply looked at Google and we checked out, who uses Google and what kind of questions are asked in Warsaw. And it turned out who's the most active? Young people. It's the young mothers who are like, they come to Warsaw quite often from outside, they do not have such close family ties, so they're on the internet. And it turned out that they had real problems to be resolved. For example, they couldn't, change the diapers in some of the offices of the city hall. So we've changed that. Then it turned out that the real problem is preschools. If you want, participation, you need to do preschools for free, and that's what we did in Warsaw. We're the only city in Poland where preschools are free. And basically, you can in most of the districts of Warsaw, you can just simply send your kids, and we pay for that. But of course, this is incredibly important in case of conservative, cynical, populist governments like we have in Poland, because they cut financing from almost everything. Like, for example, we had huge programs fighting domestic violence, and all of these NGOs lost financing. We had in vitro programs. All of that has been cut because our government introduced that. So that's what we are doing. We're taking over, and we are financing in vitro. We are financing all of those NGOs which fight with domestic violence. But the biggest problem we have now is, of course, this crazy Middle Ages anti-abortion law which was adopted by the government. And that, of course, produces quite a lot of problems for us because I run 11 hospitals. So now our doctors are under an immense strain and pressure. So what we do, we try to help them legally and so on. And when they have to take a decision about abortion, we've introduced this mechanism whereby it is a panel of doctors who takes a decision, not a single doctor, so that he cannot be then pursued by the prosecutors because our prosecutor general now is 100% political. So we do it as much as we can, and of course also when it comes to equal pay, promotion, and so on and so forth, we've done a very thorough study of what's the situation in City Hall and in all of the companies that are run by the city, and now we are trying to remedy the problem as well. So I mean, it's one of the top priorities. But at the end of the day, it is the preschools which really changed the day, because that was the most important change, and I think that's the one which is really appreciated.
Yeah. No, I mean, we all know this. We know this from Germany. You live in Berlin, and we know it. We lived in New York before. This is a big topic, preschooling, that allows women then, or parents, briefly after birth, to go back into the job so that they can also do that. Yes, in Istanbul, how is it? The role of women in Istanbul
is very important for Istanbul, because unfortunately amount of working women is less in Istanbul. And now in Istanbul municipality, we have about 85,000 workers. And in 2.5 years, we have many women workers. I mean, before our period, it was very less, but now I can say that we have countless female employees among the 85% workers. And also some are employed, for example, Istanbul Parking Enterprises Company, or bus or tram drivers. I mean, we try to say the people that women can do everything. And also, more importantly, for the first time in our municipality history, we have 3 female deputy secretary generals in the top management of our administration. This is first time, and this amount is half of our deputy secretary general. We know that for an equal society, a woman should not only be in the workforce, but also they have to be in decision-making process. So also we have Women Council, first time we created 2 years ago. And also I want to say that we have about 1.2 million children between 0 and 4. 1.2 million children. And I decided to create nurseries in Istanbul. Now we have 37 nurseries. Before us, there was no nursery, belongs to municipality. Now we have 37. At the end of this summer, it will be 70 nursery. It means at the beginning of next season, educational season, we will have 7,000 students in our nursery. It means 7,000 mothers of them can work. So this is another new project of Istanbul. Our aim is we will have next year at least 150 nursery in Istanbul. It means that about 17,000 students will be in our nursery next year. These are some.
Can I ask you, you mentioned before that you have all these 1.5 to even 3 million refugees. How much are...
1.2 million
1.2 from Syria, yes. No, but how many from the families, the refugee families, are they also offered, is that for them also able that they can send their children into the nurseries?
Yeah, I understood. Unfortunately, we don't have transparency about refugees. All numbers, all informations are in central government, and we have no information. And we have no finance about refugees, unfortunately. And we try to make connection, European Union, to work together for the refugees in Istanbul. But they address me and our metropolitan municipality to central government. But unfortunately, we don't have any link with central government about refugee system. So I don't have any information about this. Unfortunately.
But, you know, I remember because I was involved at the time when, you know, because you had so many, after 2015, you had so many refugees, European Union was giving you, I think, 3 billion in support, but this was not given into the central budget, but it was given to, you know, projects, and it was given to NGOs to implement it. So maybe there is another thing which, you know, European Union in negotiating, you know, this can see to it that it flows directly to municipalities.
Local governments has to be part of this system because we are face to face every day with them. And we are the biggest organization in our city. But unfortunately, the system is all the refugees. System of refugees is. System belongs to central government, and European Union also. The European Union works with central government. Unfortunately, we don't have any information about this.
I have to look at the time, and I have a final question, which comes from Claudia Roth, again, our Minister for Culture, and I adapt this a bit. You said earlier, Rafal, that it's an all-out war, and you were complaining, you know, the central government was calling you a sin city, and you are the love city, but you don't feel the love from the central government. In all of your countries, sooner or later, there will be elections coming up. And the question is, you know, when, how, we talked about the EU, but, you know, we have lots of people listening from civil society, from governments, you know. what would you expect? What people can do to support cities, who can support cities that implement those global goals that we all work for, the SDGs, etc. Cities like you, mayors, what are you expecting beyond the EU? We noted that. What can people around here? What can people do in the community to support you?
Well, what we've done, like in Poland, but it's the same in Hungary and same in Turkey. Like most of the local mayors do not really seek national politics. But in our case, it was the national politics which sought us. Because, we are at the forefront of change, and we are being attacked all the time. And it's not only me, but all the mayors of the other cities and the smaller municipalities as well, because the government is now redistributing money according to political criteria. If you're good, if you're fine, if you do not, ask any questions, if you do not introduce progressive policies, you will receive money. If not, you will not receive any money. So that's why we banded together, and we've created this movement of local mayors. We're collaborating every day because most of these challenges we need to resolve together. And what we are doing, we've prepared those 5 points that we are, and we are trying to pressurize the opposition. Of course, I'm a member of the vice chair of the biggest opposition party, but we are trying to pressurize all the opposition parties to actually adopt these points of devolution, of fighting climate change, of more taxes for the municipalities and so on and so forth, in order to adopt them as part of their policy platform. So then when the opposition will win the next elections, this will become a part of its program. So the conservative government wants to centralize power, and we want to devolve it even further. And of course, we just ask the people to keep the pressure on and to help us actually put these things in practice. And I always quote Arnold Schwarzenegger in this context: "We will be back."
Okay, very good. Yeah, thank you.
Törökországban is
Closest election is there.
azt mondom, én vagyok a soros, ezt a szójátékot nem tudom fordítani. Ugye Magyarországon 43 nap múlva lesz választás, Lengyelországban, meg Törökországban 1 évvel később, de hogy mi valahogy együtt mozgunk. Talán
So we will have elections in 43 days in Hungary and in Turkey and Poland soon thereafter in the next year or so.
Amikor polgármester úr megnyerte Isztambulban a választást, az a magyar belpolitikában óriási hír volt, és én azonnal vettem egy repülőjegyet Isztambulba, és meglátogattam őt, hogy mondja el, hogyan nyert.
And we are closely aligned, and each of our situation has an impact on the other. So when Mayor İmamoğlu was elected in Istanbul, it actually reverberated in the Hungarian press, and then the mayor, at the time a candidate, immediately bought a ticket to Istanbul to visit the mayor there.
Az nagyon fontos szerintem, hogy az a kampány, amivel ő nyert, az a Radical Love kampánya volt, ami arról szól, hogy hogyan lehet a konfrontációt kikerülni, a polarizációt a politikában.
And your campaign, Mayor, about the radical love that was so successful was about how to avoid the unnecessary confrontation in politics.
Ez azért nagyon fontos, mert van miközben örülünk annak, hogy vannak szabad városok, félig szabad országokban, ebben van egy nagyon nagy csapdahelyzet, amit el kell kerülnünk.
And it's important because while we are very happy that there are free cities in half-free countries, but there is a trap inbuilt there that we have to avoid.
Ugyanis a populisták, akikkel szemben küzdünk, ők imádják a polarizációt, és imádják kijátszani azt, hogy szembeállítják a nagyvárosokat a kisebb településekkel, a gazdag városokat a szegény falvakkal.
Because the populists that we are fighting against, they thrive on conflict and they thrive on polarization, and they see an opportunity here to put the major cities and metropolises in one corner and the small towns and rural communities into another corner.
Amikor Rafal indult az elnökválasztás, én nagyon drukkoltam neki, és láttam az eredményeket, mint a 2 Lengyelország lenne. A fiatalok, a nagyvárosiak, a nyugatiak rászavaztak, és a kis településeken élők, az idősebbek, a képzetlenek pedig az ellenfelére.
When Rafal was running for president, we could see on the map that there are essentially 2 Polands. There is the Poland of major cities, and then there is the Poland of the small rural communities.
Ezért nekem az volt mindig a stratégiám a magyar belpolitikában, hogy a város problémáit mindig az önkormányzatok, az autonómiák, a demokrácia felől közelítettem meg, és nem egy Budapest budapesti érdeket képviseltem, hanem az autonómiát, a helyi közösségek érdekeit.
And in a Hungarian context, what we are trying to do is to portray this fight less about major cities against smaller cities, but it's about autonomy, it's about freedom, it's about municipality, it's about the principle of subsidiarity.
Arról beszéltem, hogy Budapest a nemzet fővárosa, és aki a nemzet fővárosával megy szembe, az a nemzettel megy szembe.
I'm talking about Budapest being the capital of the nation, and whoever goes against the capital of the nation goes against the nation.
Azért tartom ezt fontosnak, mert én Budapesten érzem a progresszív pártoknak a népszerűségét. A következő választáson nem kérdés, hogy le fogjuk tarolni Budapestet, de a Fidesz-szel szembeni küzdelemben az a polarizáció, hogy Budapest a fejlett, az igazságos, a toleráns, és az ország másik fele pedig valami, ami Európával szemben megy, ez a szembeállítás, ez politikailag ellenünk fordítható.
So, while the opposition is very popular in Budapest, and it's no question that most, if not all of the districts in Budapest will be won in the parliamentary elections by the opposition, but we have to do our utmost to avoid this polarization in a national context and not to portray Budapest and the opposition's strong positions in Budapest and other major cities as sort of this enlightened elite there, and then there is the dark medieval smaller countries and communities or cities and communities across the country.
Ezért nagyon fontos nekünk, hogy ki kell aknáznunk a városokban levő lehetőséget, és persze a városaink érdekeit képviselnünk kell, de az ilyen típusú rezsimeket segítjük azzal, hogy ezt a polarizációt engedjük magunk köré szőni, és nem fordulunk ellene.
So ultimately, of course, there is power in solidarity and these networks like the Pact of Free Cities, but at the same time we have to be very mindful not to push this too far, because then regimes like the Hungarian or the Polish will capitalize on the polarization.
Of course, what you could do, and this would also be my question, because Turkey is ahead, when it comes to building infrastructure. It's amazing what has happened to your country. Of course, if you do infrastructure, if you do, if you do digitalization, broadband to the whole country, then you can have, you can enlighten also people. They don't need to come to the city to get, good jobs with digitalization, to get a good education. You can also stay outside. So this is also a method, probably difficult for cities to do, but to bring, enlightenment to the question to you.
The magic word is now in Turkey election, because we need an election for democracy, and as my friend told, we are still in radical love, because we know conflicts between central government, and we have many problems. If I try to say here our problems, we need maybe 5 or 6 hours. So it's not possible. But we don't look government. We just look at the people. We talk with them. We listen to them as opposition party members or opposition party mayors or the others. So now, after the 2019, there is a huge hope in Turkey for next election, and we have about 14 months to the time. And last week, 6 opposition party came together and signed a text for the democracy in Turkey. And I hope some other parties also join this text in near future. What I mean, we have a big mission in Turkey. Change is coming. This change also will change the system of Turkey, and this will be really a nice democracy model for Turkey, and change this now the regime of government. But also we have some risks. We know that a ballot box, we have to control it. We are working. This is a mission of people, and we succeeded it in Istanbul, and we keep one vote of voters. So the next election will be will make the people of Turkey happy. I think this is last question. I want to say one thing, that I am originally from Black Sea, and I was born in Trabzon, near the Black Sea. Black Sea is a very special geography, and there are many cultures over there. There are very many nations over there. As a people from Black Sea, I want peace in Black Sea. So I want more dialogue between Ukraine and Russia, and also NATO and Russia, and also Europe and Russia. So I want to say that we need peace in that geography in the 21st century, especially in the European geography. It can't be a war in this geography. I hope it will be the peace in that geography. Istanbul is ready. Our government and also offered a meeting in Istanbul or another city. I don't know. They have to come together, and they have to find a solution. They have to find a way of peace.
Yes, I think this is a good final word. I think everybody around here supports what you said. We want peace, around the Black Sea. We want peace between Ukraine and Russia. I want, because these are, mayors from European Union, so I don't, especially talk to you especially. I would like to thank you for participating, but I also want to thank you on something bilateral. I know that you have been very engaged in Turkish-German relations. I know that we have been celebrating last year 60 years of Turkish immigration in Germany, and you also attended, a lot of exhibitions about this, and you talked about Russia and Ukraine. I can only say, living in Berlin, where we have a very strong Turkish immigration, we have it in Germany. What has developed over time is something fantastic for our country, for your country, and this is how it can work together. And this is what we hope that will happen also between Ukraine and now. I learned a lot about the sin cities and the love cities and the total war, the all-out war with the government, everything. But what we all agree upon is, and thank you for highlighting this, the importance of cities to solve the major global problems that we are facing, climate change, but also democracy, the role of minorities, integration, and that we keep the trust of our people. So thank you all for coming here. It was really appreciated, and those here, I mean, there are many watching. I would like you all to give a round of applause to you, and thank you. Thank you.